Imagine waking up with a toothache 10,000 years before dentists existed. There is no clinic waiting down the road. There is no toothbrush with heroic mint flavor. There is no tiny paper cup of water after the appointment. There is only you, your jaw, and a pain that keeps getting louder. Now here is the uncomfortable question. What did ancient humans actually do when a tooth started to rot? For a long time, we imagined them simply suffering through it. But archaeology has been quietly telling a much stranger story. At Mayagor, in what is now Pakistan, researchers found 11 drilled molars. Those teeth came from 9 adults who lived about 7,500 to 9,000 years ago. That means someone was putting holes into painful teeth thousands of years before modern dentistry. No, this was not a spa day. This was probably a person, a sharp stone drill, and a very brave patient. To understand why this mattered, we need to start with the mouth. A toothache is not just a small annoyance with dramatic timing. It can mean decay, infection, cracked enamel, swollen gums, or exposed nerves. Inside each tooth is a living chamber filled with nerves and blood vessels. When damage reaches that chamber, pain can become sharp, pulsing, and impossible to ignore. For ancient humans, that pain could change everything. Chewing became harder, sleeping became worse, hunting, gathering, and carrying food became more exhausting. Even smiling at your prehistoric friend probably felt like a terrible idea, and if infection spread, a tooth problem could become a life problem, so ancient humans had a powerful reason to do something. The first solution was probably the simplest one. They poked at the painful place. That sounds crude. But it is also very human. When something hurts between your teeth, your hand wants to investigate. Archaeologists have found ancient teeth with grooves that look like repeated toothpick use. Some Neanderthal teeth from Krapina show signs of this kind of manipulation. The marks suggest that someone kept scraping or picking near a painful area. Maybe they used wood. Maybe they used bone. Maybe they used a tiny stone point that would make every dentist today panic. But the idea was familiar. Find the irritating spot, touch it, clean it, and hope the pain calms down. This was not modern medicine, but it was problem solving. Then the story becomes more intense. Some ancient people did not stop at picking teeth. They drilled them at Mayagor. The drilled molars show circular holes made with impressive control. Researchers think the same drilling skills used for beads may have been adapted for teeth. That detail is important. People were not randomly smashing mouths with rocks. They already knew how to rotate hard tools against small objects. Then one day, someone may have looked at a rotten tooth and had a terrible idea. What if we drill the bad part out? That thought is both clever and horrifying. It is clever because it connects cause and effect. It is horrifying because the tooth is still attached to a person. Imagine the scene around a small Neolithic settlement. Someone sits near the ground with a swollen jaw. Another person holds a tiny flint point between their hands. The group understands that the painful tooth is the enemy. The patient understands that the cure may hurt almost as much as the problem. There is no anesthesia. There is no soothing background music. There is only trust, pressure, and the sound of stone working against enamel. The procedure may have been quick, but it was not simple. Tooth enamel is the hardest tissue in the human body. Even today, dentists use powered tools designed for precision. Ancient drillers had muscle, patience, and stone, yet the holes they made were not careless accidents. They were small, deliberate, and placed in molars. That suggests skill. It also suggests that people were willing to experiment with the body. Pain was not just something to endure. Pain was a puzzle, and ancient humans were puzzle solvers. Another clue comes from a much smaller and stickier discovery. In Slovenia, researchers found a roughly 6,500-year-old human jaw. One cracked tooth had traces of beeswax on it. That beeswax may have worked like a primitive filling. If it was placed during life, it could have sealed a sensitive crack. That means someone may have tried to cover the painful area instead of removing it, suddenly. Ancient dentistry sounds less like blind brutality. It sounds like trial and error. Scrape this, seal that. Pick here, drill there. Try anything that might stop the lightning inside the jaw. Of course, not every toothache received clever treatment. Many people probably did suffer. Some teeth wore down from tough foods, some cracked from grit in stone-ground meals. Some became infected with no good way to stop the damage. Ancient mouths were not protected by fluoride toothpaste and regular checkups. But they were also not always the disaster we imagine. Hunter-gatherer diets often contained less refined sugar than many modern diets. That probably meant fewer sugar-driven cavities in some groups. Then farming changed the menu. More grains and starches entered daily life. Sticky carbohydrates could feed bacteria in the mouth. As diets changed, dental problems became more common in many communities. In other words, civilization brought bread, villages, and new ways for teeth to betray us. This is where the story gets even more human. A person with a serious toothache needed more than a tool. They needed help. They needed someone willing to look closely inside their mouth. They needed someone steady enough to touch a painful tooth. They needed enough trust not to bite the helper immediately. That trust tells us something powerful about ancient communities. Care is not just a modern invention. Long before hospitals, humans were already trying to reduce each other's suffering. Even Neanderthals may have been part of this story. A Neanderthal molar from Chajyskaya Cave in Siberia shows signs of deliberate drilling. Researchers dated it to about 59,000 years ago. The marks suggest a stone tool may have been rotated into a cavity. The goal may have been to remove decayed tissue and relieve pain. Think about that for a second. A Neanderthal with a terrible toothache may have undergone dental treatment, not because someone had a diploma on the cave wall, but because someone understood that the painful hole was the problem. That does not make Neanderthals modern dentists. But it does make them much harder to underestimate. They were not cartoon brutes grunting at the moon. They were skilled, observant, social humans with complicated lives, and apparently, some of those lives included extremely unpleasant dental appointments. There may also have been plant remedies. Many traditional societies used bark, leaves, resins, or herbs for pain and inflammation. The problem is that soft plant medicines rarely survive in the archaeological record. A drilled tooth can last for thousands of years. A chewed leaf usually cannot, so the evidence we see is only part of the story. Ancient people may have rinsed, chewed, packed, scraped, and prayed. Some methods may have helped, some probably made things worse. A few may have started as desperate guesses and became shared knowledge. That is how many human inventions begin. Someone hurts, someone tries something, someone remembers what worked, then the next person suffers a little less. There is a strange comfort in that. The history of dentistry did not begin with perfect tools. It began with pain and attention. It began with people noticing that a tiny dark spot could create enormous misery. It began with hands steady enough to help another person through fear. And it began with the ancient truth that humans hate toothaches with remarkable consistency. Today, we complain about dental appointments, we fear the drill, we avoid the chair, we act personally betrayed by floss. But compared with ancient humans, we are incredibly lucky. Our dentists have lights, gloves, x-rays, anesthetic, and machines that do not require campfire courage. Ancient humans had stone, wood, wax, and hope, yet they still tried. That is the twist. The real story is not that ancient tooth care was brutal. The real story is that it was compassionate. A toothache forced people to understand the body from the inside out. It turned pain into a reason to invent. It turned suffering into social trust, and somewhere between a stone tool and a swollen jaw, dentistry began. So here is the final question. If you had a toothache 10,000 years ago, what would you choose? Would you live with the pain? Would you try a wooden toothpick? Or would you let someone near your mouth with a sharp stone drill?